Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Colin and Addy's podcast. Today is the 8th of December, almost Christmas time, 2025. And I'm super pleased, and we are super pleased to have Pavel Pojdl, veteran of the oil market, here with us. Pavel's worked with some of the greatest traders and some of the best companies in the world. And we are just going to have a fireside chat with Pavel about the good old days and where the market has been going and how it's developed. So, Pavel, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
please just introduce yourself in your own words.
Yeah, well, uh, just tell me when the introduction is too long. So, as you said, I'm Pavel Pojdl. I've been in the industry since the mid '70s, and I had a very bizarre, to say the least, way into commodities. I'm a son of immigrants who came to Switzerland in 1968 when the Warsaw Pact invaded Czechoslovakia. My father immediately had a job in Swiss television because that's what his background was. And I was basically a mediocre student who was more involved in ice hockey. And that was my most important thing that I was doing. And in 1977, I got a hockey transfer to Geneva. And the main aim of that was for me to learn French. As a Swiss, I was living in Switzerland, so learning French fluently was an important thing for me back then. And through my father's friends, I got a job at TradeX in 1977. The person who organized the deal for me and who I owe a great deal of gratitude was Dr. Milan Sladek. And Milan Sladek features greatly in a book called The Merchants of Grain.
Sure.
He was the instrumental player between Cargill and the Russians. He was selling all the grain to Russia in the 70s and buying stuff from the Russians. So he was very successful, and he basically introduced me, and I could not speak a word of English. I could not speak a word of French, and I certainly did not know anything about commodities. I mean, zero. That was for me like nuclear science. And so they give me a job in the post department or something like that to carry out letters. And then I moved on to the contract department, where these busy bees, these ladies, were writing all these grain contracts. And about a week or so in the company, a guy comes to my desk who I'm supposed to tell something about what I'm doing. That person was Michael Hacking. I don't know if you know Michael Hacking.
But introduce him for our listeners, please.
Michael Hacking was and many companies that I forgot, but now he was basically the principal of the company called Moco.
Sure.
And I don't know if he still is active, but like me, he's on in age. Anyway, so I could not tell Michael anything about the business. So we basically wasted about 2-3 hours sitting there talking about everything else but business. Anyway, I make my way through the company, and I was asked to play soccer for the Cargill, for the TradeX team. And there I bumped into a guy who was quite good at football, was named Jez Tozik. Does that ring a bell?
No, not with me.
Jez Tozik was one of the players in Vulcan.
Okay.
And he basically became in Tradox Petroleum. And since he knew me from the soccer team, he said, there's this kid. They were looking for people in the company to recruit. There's this kid, Pavel. Maybe we should ask him. So, I was making nothing. I was in the shipping department of grain. I knew nothing, but doing demurrages and so learning about demurrages. So I got the job in Tradex Petroleum when Tradex bought from Petromer in the US. So there was Ben Polner and I think a guy by the name of Ken Newman, if my memory serves me. So Ben came to Geneva and they hired several traders from the grain department. So Jess Tozik, Audrey Fogel, François Delarue, etc., etc. I might be forgetting some. Theo Sanders,
John Branton? No.
John Brunton. Now there you go. So I got thrown into this pot, and I liked what I saw, and I was doing operations for barges and for oil cargoes, gas oil cargoes. And then my colleague, Carlo Cattaneo, wanted to become an oil trader. And then he realized that they told him no because he didn't have a college degree. And I, as a hockey player, I certainly did not have a college degree. So I realized and took that as a sign to move to quit and get myself a college degree in Minnesota. And then I applied for Cargill for the job. And then the story developed. But at the time in Tradex, there was in America a Madison Galbraith, there was Hugo Zagaria, there was Ann Summers.
Yeah.
And so I was a couple times in New York on my way to find my college thing. So I interacted. And it was really the good old days, I have to say.
Sure.
At the time, so you joined Cargill, and that's something we haven't really covered that well in the book. You mentioned a few names, but we didn't really talk to anyone from from the early days. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what you were doing in Cargill and if they were in oil trading at the time?
Well, when I came into this thing, I think it's 1980. We were starting to trade barges. So there was Audrey Fogel was doing the cargoes, the gas oil cargoes. Jess was basically the connection to with the East because that's what he was doing before, and Ben was basically doing the trading and I think crude oil as well. And there was also a guy by the name of Paul Brunner who was doing petrochemicals.
Yeah.
And François Delarue was handling NAFTA. There was also a guy by the name of John Drury. And John Drury left at the time to go and start JR.
Yeah, I remember that. Australian guy, right?
Because I was a college kid. Then I spent a few weeks sleeping on his couch because I depended on the kindness of strangers, being a college boy, and I was coming back in the summer to basically work and help out on the shipping, on the operations.
They were great. They were great teachers. They had the reputation, I think,
Yeah,
for educating their people really well, understanding the fundamentals.
yeah,
And
that's what Cargill was about, and it was they really forged this thing of team, right? We are a team. We all work together. Me coming from a team sport, and it was maybe one of the things that I was maybe not as good at is basically to be a bit more individualistic. I was really about the team. It was just second nature to me.
Yeah.
And when you finished up with Cargill, Pavel, did you go directly to Phibro or did you have
so I came back I graduated in 3 years. I got the degree in America, and I went to interview with Tradex, Cargill by that time in Geneva, and they were sort of they were lukewarm on me. And then I interviewed in the US, and I got a job. I mean, immediately. And so I started in Peoria in the grain department, and I was there for 2 years. And then they realized in Geneva that I'm sitting in Peoria and they should have me in Geneva. So they moved me to Geneva, and on the desk was Tom Klomp and Frank Stalhanske, and so I joined to basically run the barges business, the future deliveries. We took delivery of the futures. We converted into barges, sold them to Germany and Switzerland. And one day, this kid, I think this kid came in, Marco Dunant, and it was very quick to see that he was really cut above all of us. He was just smart. A week into the business, he's asking these pertinent questions that nobody else sort of dared asking. And so about a year into it, Ton joined Aaron, and I think he recruited Marco to come along with him.
Right.
And then I then was transferred to the fuel oil department. I did a few disasters on the Littlebrook and I was sort of asking, hey guys, what are the plans in Cargill for me? And again, the reception was sort of lukewarm, and I received a job offer from Zarnico Futures in New York. And I really was keen on returning to America, especially New York, because I thought Geneva was too small for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to New York to work for Zarnico as a futures broker, to replace Guy Marison, who then resigned to join Aaron.
Yes.
And so obviously I had big shoes to fill, but I think I filled them rather well. And when I was in New York, I really wanted to land a job. For me, the dream was to be at Phibro, right? So Phibro was like the ultimate. For me, it was the ultimate dream to join Phibro. By this time, I thought, guys, they know what they're doing, and I can really.
But it was for most people,
The reputation, the behavior. I mean, I saw George Sagredos. He had this in the 80s. He had this monster telephone. I want to be just like this guy
with the monster telephone.
And so when I was in New York, my CV landed in Zug at Peter Arbenz' desk, and somebody in Phibro who came from Cargill basically said, "Yeah, Pavel is a good guy."
Pavel,
So,
can I just ask you just one quick step back
yeah.
to Cargill? When you were there, you met Marco. Wasn't Danny around as well?
Danny was around. Danny was. He doesn't like me to say that, and I won't. But he was in the HR department. I couldn't help myself, and then he realized that he was on the wrong track. So he very quickly got onto the right track by joining the NAFTA department, and then very quickly after Marco left, he joined Aaron as well.
Very interesting, you mentioned about how Phibro were the big ticket and the place everybody wanted to go, and I remember that very well myself. But then 5 years later, it was J&S, and everyone had forgotten about Phibro. And 10 years later, it was Vito, and everybody had forgotten about both Phibro and J&S. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it?
I mean, when I got so much to be thankful for Peter Arbenz, who was my tutor really, and in Cargill, you didn't learn this entrepreneurial thing. You learned the fundamentals, you learned the futures, you learned the contango, you learned the backwardation, you learned the spreads. But entrepreneurial, Cargill was not. If you did something right, it was a team effort, and if you screwed up, it was your fault. So when I came to Phibro, Peter Arbenz basically told me, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. Yeah. You do what you think, and you run it like it's your own business. and that was really really a game changer for me.
Very
So,
interesting, because I guess what you're saying is that Cargill were effectively sort of risk managers, whereas Phibro were risk takers. Yeah,
well, Cargill was
and
huge. It was already making a lot of money, and I think what you mentioned early on was that they were doing a lot of grain business with Russia. I was in academia at the time, and I remember doing a paper, writing a paper where I realized that actually most of that grain was paid in gold,
Yeah, yeah.
which must have been a pretty interesting trade, about to trade grain for gold. But anyway, going back to Phibro, do you when was this, and who was
This
running?
was the 19. This was 1991. I came to New York in 1988, and I joined Phibro in May of 1991. I mean, I had an interview with Andy sort of in summer of with Malcolm McAvity. I had an interview with Malcolm McAvity in May 3, 1991. I know this exactly because it was the day before my wedding and the day after my stag night. So so I so
That
it
was a
was
good interview.
quite yeah, I think it's the fact that I showed up the day up, that I had the nerve to show up after my stag night gave me the kudos for the job.
yeah, great. And so you must have gone very quickly into the Russian business,
Yeah,
because that was
so they hired me with the idea that I will go to London and I will sort of man the Eastern European, Central European desk as everything was opening up, and my heritage and uh, I think Peter Arvens took a shine to me, and he thought I was the right guy for the job, and so I moved from New York back to London in 1991, and in the beginning it was like how Bill Browder writes about this in his book, that nobody wanted to do anything to do with him. There was the same thing. I went on a business trip. I come back, my desk was gone. Somebody else sat on my desk. So it was musical chairs. And then my first deal in Phibro was just the beginning of the Balkan War, and the Czechs bought some palanka that was in the pipeline, and they wanted to in Sisak, in the Sisak refinery, they had oil in tanks, and they were afraid of there would be aerial attacks on the refinery. So they wanted to push the oil out of the tanks into the pipeline, which would then basically mean that the palanka that was stuck in the pipeline would have to go. So the Czechs owned that palanka. So I bought it from the Czechs and I sold it to the Hungarians, made a little bit of money. My first deal, I did not have a contract. It was Friday night, and I was sitting in the office until 1 a.m. to write the contract.
yeah,
And then Mike Grimet would call me. I just hope you know what your risks and what your liabilities are. And I'm going, no, no chance.
Yeah, just to remind the listeners a little bit, this is Adria Pipeline,
Yeah,
okay, and Sisak refineries in Croatia.
it's included.
Exactly. So what you've taken, you could have taken down the pipeline that oil to Czech Republic now, or Czechoslovakia then, or could go the other way all the way to Hungary. But that Adria pipeline comes from Rijeka, from the Adriatic Sea, where actually, if I remember correctly, INA, which is Croatian company at the time, also had a small equity in Palanca.
Correct. So in Angola, right?
Yeah,
It's Angola, yeah, Angola.
yeah, yeah.
So I bought it. I made a little bit of money, and then Saturday morning, I turn on the television, BBC, and I see this aerial attack on on the tanks in Sisak, and I'm going. I hope I wrote the liability clause appropriately, and better to be lucky than good.
Yeah.
I presume that the oil has already gone into the pipeline before they agreed the deal, and I was just the guy who basically legitimized it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everybody wanted me to join their desk, and they said, "Hey, Pavel, sit here next to me." And
Yep.
there you
Now you're
go.
making money. You're a star. Can I just
Oh,
quickly ask you at the time if Phibro, I mean, Colin and I do know, but if you can just remember who the key traders were at the
yeah.
time.
So uh, uh, I think that I start from the freight department. There was the legendary Andy Fryatt. He was just amazing, and I hear he's no longer with us, but I had so much respect for his knowledge, and he never steered me wrongly. So if I needed, if I was short, he says, "Don't book the freight yet. Let's wait," and he always was the right call on from him. So Andy Fryatt, there was the leader of the gang was Mike Grimet. Then there was there was Danny Masters. He was on the Brent market. Then there was Matt Ferry, who was in the products when I came. Carl Belfrag in fuel oil. Jeez, now you really try. And there was also Christoph Groh was there. He was doing.
John Carr, maybe.
John Carr was already gone. When I joined, John Carr was already gone. He went to, I believe, Arcadia, right?
Yeah, your Kunz.
Jörg Kunz was there. So yes, Jörg Kunz was there. Also on the crude oil market, right? And there was Bert Rieder, and but he was on the way out because the Swiss guys didn't want to move to London. That was beneath them. So obviously, I filled in I was the eager one who wanted to come and join. I would have joined Phibro if it was on the moon. I would have gone there.
I
And
might.
were you involved in Phibro's business in Western Siberia?
Well, I knew
White
about,
Knight, yeah,
but
White
they
Knight.
kept it the White Knights. They
Yeah.
Yes.
kept it. They kept it separately. We always tried to have some crude oil from them to bring it to the market, but there was hardly any ever. It went into the system, Russian system, and they sold it to whoever they could. And so we had an office in Moscow back then. So we had a Norwegian guy from Statoil called Sveinung Medas, who went to run this show, and there was John Hart, and we had local people. There was uh, uh, Nebaeva. Now I don't know her first name. God, she will kill me. She went to Arcadia later on, and Vladimir Kuznetsov, who then after Phibro went to work for Yukos, and
And
then
then
Hall.
at some stage, I'm just trying to move on to within sort of some reasonable time limit. Then Danny and Marco joined from J&S.
Correct. Marco joined first because there were some issues that I don't want to think about. He basically became available, and I called Andy Hall. Much to my credit, I called Andy Hall and I said, I think there's this kid on the market. I think we should hire. And so Andy said, "Yeah, okay, tell him to call me." So I told Marco, gave him the telephone number, and that the rest is history. Correct. And then Marco forced basically Danny to resign and join him as well.
And that's how they're sort of Brent trading, which is pretty legendary.
Yeah, and Danny Masters was already gone, and there was also Russ Newton was at the time.
Of course,
Sure.
Ross, yeah.
And then he saw the writing on the wall, and he went for better or greener pastures. And Danny Masters was already gone at J.P. Morgan.
Yeah, Danny went to J.P. Morgan, and then Russ. I think he was a very short period in a halfway house that we called Rhine Oil, and then he joined him there. And we had a long chat with Russell. It was really, really helpful. I just want to say one thing about Danny. It was because he was the first guy I ever met in the West in trading, in the office, the Phibro office. And it turned out that he was a pilot, and I used to fly gliders. So we had a really good conversation. Colin, of course, is a pilot as well, but we had a really good conversation because he very much impressed me. I think he was a year or so younger than me, but
He was so impressive. He was so impressive.
he
I
was
mean,
he was
this guy was had it all.
yeah, he suddenly says like, "Oh yeah, I've got a 6-seat twin engine aircraft." And I'm
No,
like,
no,
I was a uni guy, right?
he brought the Pilatus training plane from Switzerland to London.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Pilatus Army or Air Force training plane.
Oh,
So
okay.
he was larger than life, and we went to. He said, "Well, I'm going to Zermatt to climb the Matterhorn." And I said, "Hey, can I come with you?" "I'll come." So we went together, tried to climb the Matterhorn.
Yeah. It's very interesting, he was obviously and remains an exceptional individual. And his colleague, and you mentioned it earlier, Marco Dunan, is somebody who, time and time again, when we interviewed people for this book, people said this guy was special. He
Yeah.
was something very.
I met several people. I mean, few people like that. I met one person in Cargill who I thought was brilliant. Then Marco, obviously, I think they basically cut to the chase. And Marco was in Cargill. He was on the job 2 months, and he'd shoot out this French oil trader who thought he knew everything about the oil trading. And Marco read him the riot act. And I'm going, "Pooh, where's this coming from?" It's just uh, just cut to the chase. Just be absolutely clinical about it, and for it's just true. The cream rises to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone who's dispassionate in his approach to the market. And I always thought in my day, the people who were dispassionate with their approach to the market often were the best traders. Don't get tied to your position. Don't think you're bigger than the market.
Yeah,
Just be very dispassionate.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I worked with them for a while at Sempra, and I just want to throw in that Danny. My impression is that Danny is pretty decent trader too.
No.
Very decent,
Dennis
very
is
very
certainly
good.
smart and he's accomplished as well. And but yeah, for sure.
As,
I
as,
do I do not want to denigrate Danny one iota.
Absolutely. I mean, they're just yin and yang, and as Russ Newton said, and he worked with them, I think, for a while. He said they're just better together.
But I go on record. Here that their nicknames, Bambi and Godzilla, were coined by me.
Okay, let's just stick to
I take
the
credit for that. I take credit for that.
let's stick to what Sempra guys used to call them, mum and dad.
Yeah.
Anyway, or Mercuria now. So now, can we speed up to the really interesting bit where you ended up with a J&S, because that period is kind of really, really interesting because it leads on to the origins of Mercuria, which is now one of the greatest trading companies.
Yeah. So in 1992, my first visit to Moscow, it was just before Thanksgiving, and we already have done a deal for 5,000 tons to Hungary, a small deal, and my Moscow people thought that it would be good if I met these two guys in Moscow. So we drove out the Geological Institute. I don't know where it was. It was, and then in second sub basement, I'm going, "Jeez, where am I going?" And I met Slava, and he thought, that our Phibro is arrogant, and that I'm. And I said, "Look, Phibro may be arrogant, but I'm not." And so we kind of hit it off. We uh, did a few more deals, but nothing major. And then I lost them from the view. And then I was trying to do pipeline business, pipeline crude oil to Poland. And all of a sudden I see this J&S everywhere. And I'm going, who are these guys? And I just honestly, I did not connect the two and two. And then I said, well, there's Slava Smolkovsky. And then, oh my God, so then we sort of made an approach. And I met them, and we started doing more business because I needed to buy some pipeline crude oil for Poland, and that was basically how we got into talking again. And then because we're doing business, I invited them to this infamous Pamplona. I invited them. Borja Vergareche was organizing that gig. And he said, hey, you want to invite some people? And I said, yeah, I would like to invite, Slava and Grisha. And they did not enjoy it, put it this way. This was not their idea of fun. But I thought it was great. And so we start doing, they telling me about their business and what they needed. And, they had some flexibility on the pricing. So we were doing swaps. And Marco and Danny gave me the market on the swaps, and I basically became the salesman for this, and that was quite a bit of business, yeah.
And where does Slava and Grisha get their barrels from?
Well, they with a pinch of salt. I hope I not nothing. They were connected because they were in Germany, and they were doing some transport. The first business was transport of consumer goods for the returning army soldiers back to Russia, and then they got connected somehow in the Tumen region. So the Tumen region gave them some barrels to market. That's when I started buying from them, and they grew the business. And I think they were buying from Surgut. They were buying from all sorts of sources.
Yeah.
But I think what they did is that they guaranteed the Polish refiners something that nobody else would do, and that was that in case they were not able to supply Russian crude oil, they would supply them with North Sea barrels at the same price of euros. So that was quite an exposure that they took in case they could not perform.
Wow. Yeah.
And so they took certainly a great deal of risk. And this was for more than just a year. This was for quite a long term.
Yeah, I think at that time you had to be very, very connected, didn't you? In in Tumen or in Moscow, where you had to have some connection, really, to be able to accomplish export of crude from Russia in that way. So they must have had some connection somewhere, I guess.
Yeah. And then, when I joined in 1999, after Marco and Danny left, I was basically the only guy left standing in Phibro. And I go, and then at the same time, Slava asked me if I would be interested in joining them. They needed somebody to market their barrels, to help them with the trading and so on. And I said, yeah, I would love to work with you, for you, and so on. So I started the London office of J&S, and at the time we were getting quite a few cargoes through Gdansk, basically shipping crude oil through the parent pipeline, the Druzhba pipeline into Gdansk, when there was spare capacity. And so this was like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 cargoes a month that we were able to export. And so I was busy with that.
But you got to one stage, I mean, I just know from press and readings when we were researching for the company, for the book, at one stage you guys were supplying Poland with like up to 90% of all the oil.
Yeah,
I mean, you were huge. You were, I
Yeah,
mean,
I,
you're
I,
again
I
the biggest supplier in that part of the world.
yeah, certainly there was the what J&S was doing. I had Me personally, I had nothing to do with that. They were doing that before me, and they were doing it after me. Also, so I basically was in tasked to help them export the barrels through Gdansk, market those barrels, and see what other business I could generate. And back then in 2000, we were having a contract out of Syria, which I was selling into Croatia, Serbia, Czech Republic, Exxon. So that was that, and one of the other things that we really did at the time was we landed a joint venture with Cheniere in LNG,
Okay.
which was way ahead of its time.
Yeah, sure.
And in a way, when Mercuria got founded, they basically said, we cannot focus on this. LNG is too early for us. So we sort of let it die, but it's a pity because that could have been a massive business
Yeah.
for us, for me, for Mercuria, what have you.
But it's a perfect segue onto the setting up of Mercuria. And by the way, I mean, they spent many, many years trying very hard to catch up with Vito and the likes on LNG. So yeah, it's a really interesting point you mentioned. But
No,
Mercuria,
we were there probably before anybody else. We were already building LNG tankers in the early 21st century. So, but what has happened? We were basically thinking that LNG, the US would import LNG rather than export, and then within a year or two, the whole thing has shifted from import to export. But the tankers were still, and at the time there was quite a few tankers looking for jobs, and so it there was just the bottom of the market.
so Mercuria, can you tell us more about it, early days and how it all went?
Rather not.
Okay. Well, can you tell us what you can? I mean, just
No,
not for a general, it could be just a general sort of
no, it was amazing to see the incredible uh, energy that came with Marco and Danny, and them being motivated to make the company in their own image, and there was no room for strugglers, right? And clearly I was getting on in life, and after 5 years the company was getting big. I was a tiny shareholder. I basically then decided to it was best if I step out, and so I was basically on the desk as a staff trader with Chappie and with Wolf, Kurt Chapman, and Wolfram Tummel. And to this day, we are close friends.
yeah.
But
Well,
it was they were starting to doing coal. They were starting to do the carbon credits, and it's just exploded.
were you there the time when they well, you must have been. They were working very, very hard on China business. That was back in Sempra days still, and they just brought back Han Jin.
Marco was a visionary. He started cultivating China when we were at Phibro together. He was in for the long game, and he would go travel to China and meet with them and talk with them and so on. And certainly saw that, very early on. And again, he was in for the long game.
That is absolutely true because I remember late 90s. I went to Singapore in 2000. In the late 90s, Marco and I used to play tennis in Paddington Recreation Grounds in London. We would have these games, and one game he says, "Oh, by the way, I hired Han Jin, and I knew Han Jin for many years from Sinochem days, and
And
with
Zhu Hong. And
Zhu
Zhu Hong.
Hong, yeah, yeah." And I was like, "Wow, that's a surprise. What's the thinking?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm really, really bullish China. I think China's going to come in, sooner or later, and it's going to be the big new thing.
Yeah.
Spot on, spot on.
Well, I mean, honestly, he was friendly with Han Jin in the 90s when he was in Phibro. We had the dinners at in Winton Street or whatever it's called. They were near Steinockham.
Right. Well, talking of which, what were the sort of places you guys used to hang out on a sort of more
I never hang
social?
out. I was all business.
You must have been the only one.
No, but
No,
Phibro was very interesting. I remember, obviously, I was in London. I remember, I think, first time somewhere in the early 90s when I met with Marco and Danny after work for a beer. Um, and Danny came on his Harley Davidson with all the leathers and stuff. And he came straight from the office, and I was like, "Is that how you go to the office?" And he said, "Yeah, sure."
yeah. No, I was also riding on the motorcycle to work every day. I never used public transport in London. Come rain or shine, I was on the motorbike to Victoria Plaza. Anyway, apropos the hangouts, I would have to think one comes to mind is Boysdale's.
Oh yeah. Afterwards, it was a big VTOL, probably still is, big VTOL place, right,
Yeah,
Colin?
but back then it was a big Phibro hangout.
Ah, okay. Cool. Yeah. No, absolutely, yeah. So we're getting very close to our time. I don't know if there's anything else you would just wish to add to this
As I
fantastic
said,
recollection.
no, as I said, I am in awe of what they have accomplished. I would say I'm chuffed that I have been a small cog in a big machine, and I look at these things back in really with pride,
Yeah.
and I read now what's happening in the business, and I think that Mercuria and the other companies, maybe with the exception of one, are really well placed to take it to now, because the business is changing, and I think the opportunities now
Yeah.
will be amazing, because
I would
there's
just like to
really a
add,
new world now. There's a new world order.
talking of the early investment, I have to add just a little one with Han Jin, who I have massive respect for. I was a gastro marketing trading, had a trip to London with my boss, with the president of all the trading, shipping, and everything. And I just wanted to basically book a lunch for him. So I called Han Jin, and he invited us kindly for lunch to a Chinese restaurant. And I worked quite a while, and I knew Han Jin for many, many years. And it was interesting. We're talking about Mercuria, what they were doing. And I just remember Han Jin saying, like, yeah, we're really kind of expanding into China. He said, and you know what? Marco is actually going to Davos, and I arranged for him to meet Xi Jinping. I was
Wow.
like, what am I doing here? I'm out of my league. Guys, well done.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I was, again, these early days when the first trip that Mercuria, I mean J&S, took to China, I was in on that trip. And another anecdote is that we got a gift of a jade globe, and we went on a PJ, right, private jet, flying to to Beijing, and we got this giant globe made out of semi-precious stone jade,
Wow.
beautiful. And it came crated, and we could not put it into the PJ, so we had to disassemble the globe to put it into the plane. And then, of course, we landed in Kazakhstan on the way back to refuel, and they wanted to know what the heck is this. So we got the globe for Mercuria globe domination.
Lovely.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. I don't know, Colin, do you have anything else? Because we are actually well over time, but it was worth every second. I
Yeah, I
think.
think we're there. I admire your modesty, Pavel. I think my impression always has been that you were more than just a small cog, as you put it yourself.
No. Honestly, I may come full circle now, because, as I said, I was from wee boy. I mean, I was 5 years old when I started playing ice hockey, and I'm going to be 70. I'm still playing ice hockey 2-3 times a week with the
Fabulous.
old men. And teamwork is something that I really has always been. I said I'm just a part of the team. My strength is the contacts. The people trust me, and I was always good getting people together,
Yeah.
and I have proven it over and over again. So that's trading a bit mediocre.
And a very important point, Pavel, is you're a great guy to have a beer with. So please, every time you come to London, give us a call.
Yeah.
Thank
Well, that's
you
been a
very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Absolute
It was a
pleasure.
pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.